How's it going, everyone? Sorry for Mother SpongeBob. That was today. It's July 4th, 2021, and I hope you guys are having a great 4th of July. As today, we're going to talk about Tropical Storm Elsa and see what impacts it poses to the United States and Cuba in the future. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. So let's begin by taking a look at the current water vapor loop for Tropical Storm Elsa at this time, and you see that it is starting to look less organized. We're starting to see dry air filter the west side of this storm, and there isn't as much convection around the center of circulation, which means that this storm is weaker pretty much when there's less convection, because the air is more stable in this region and there isn't as much of air pressure difference between the higher air pressure just outside of this low and the lower level center, which means that the winds have weakened as a result of a lack of convection and the air has stabilized. However, we are seeing still good outflow from this storm on the north and southern side of the storm. However, the convection isn't there, so as a result, this storm has weakened over the past several hours. If we were to take a look at its current wind speed, you see that the maximum sustained winds have weakened since yesterday, down to 60 miles per hour, and it has been on a weakening trend for, I'd say, the past 2 days at this point, where it peaked at 85 miles per hour at one point, but now we're starting to see it gradually weaken. And you might be asking, what is the primary reason why? Well, if we take a look at the current wind shear map, there isn't really much wind shear, surprisingly, because typically you might expect the reason why a tropical cyclone would weaken is due to wind shear. However, the wind shear is relatively light in this region, so the wind shear isn't the primary reason why this is weakening. However, a pretty big reason why this is weakening is currently the dry air that's towards the western side of the storm, and with the dry air on the western side, that inhibits convection, which is essential for strengthening the storm. Because if we were to take a look at a GFS model, you see that there's a lot of dry air to the western side of the storm. It isn't a ton, but there's still enough to inhibit tropical cyclone development and to weaken the lower level winds around center circulation, as most of the convection and most of the strong winds are in the eastern side of the storm. However, another big reason why the storm has been weakening is because the lower level low and the mid level low are pretty much in two completely separate areas, with the lower level low pressure system located further westward, while the mid level low is located further eastward. And when that happens, when we aren't seeing the low level and mid level winds coincide with each other, it becomes difficult for the wind or convection to focus in one area. So they're sort of competing for energy, these two low pressure systems, which is a reason why we've been seeing weakening trend. And the reason why the mid level low and the lower level low are in two separate areas is because of how fast the storm was moving earlier. Like I said in my previous videos, one of the things that might inhibit the strength of the storm is how fast this storm is moving, because since this storm was moving at around at a clip of 30 miles per hour, the lower level winds, I suspected that the lower level low would eventually outpace the upper level low in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and eventually that might weaken the storm, since the winds are in the same area and the convection isn't focused in one area, with energy being all over the place, with the lower level low in a different location than the mid level low. So as a result, this is a primary reason why it's been weakening, because pretty much the lower level low and the upper level low are in two completely separate areas, so we aren't seeing that convection focus in one area. And you might be asking, well, is there a possibility that the lower level low and the mid level low get back into the same position to start to regain strength of the storm and to regain more convection? And I'd say there is a possibility, especially since a storm has begun to move slower now. If we were to take a look at the current speed of the storm, now it's moving at an average speed, because before it was moving around twice as fast and just very fast, but now it's beginning to slow down at 14 miles per hour going to the northwest. So since the storm is moving lower, that does give it a better chance for the lower level winds and the mid level winds to begin to focus in on one area and to get closer to each other. So we could see that. So we could see that happen over the next several hours or days. However, the problem is for this storm is that it's just going to deal with a lot of land interaction, and that might slow the development of this storm and the center of circulation in general in the mid levels and the lower levels of the atmosphere, because it's expected to move over Cuba, and while it does have a little bit of time over water before it reaches Florida, it isn't a ton of time, so it's unlikely that we're gonna see a fully fledged center circulation within this short time span, where it's just going to deal with a lot of land interaction that might weaken the storm even more. So there's a possibility that this storm does not at all re-strengthen. There is that possibility it does, depending on how much land interaction this brings and how slow this storm moves. If it moves slower, then we're more likely to see a strengthening storm. However, if it moves a little bit too fast, we're less likely to see it, and it'll interact too much with land overall. So we just have to wait and see. However, the current consensus is that the strength of this storm till it reaches Florida will remain around the same, at around 60, maybe 65 miles per hour or 70. As the upper end is maybe hurricane status, but that is less likely at this point, as this currently is most likely going to stay at a strong tropical storm strength between 55 and 65 miles per hour, right around that range. But there is still that possibility it could go over that. So we just need to wait and see, and to not let your guard down in Florida or Cuba just because it's a tropical storm, because there's still impacts with this storm. Now, in terms of the general track of this storm, you should expect, if we were to take a look at the computer model ensemble members, you see that they're pretty much in good agreement now. The European and GFS model, before they had pretty big disagreements, but now they're in agreement that this will move just to the west of Florida. It's pretty much impossible that this will meander to the east of Florida or very far west, as it seems like it's expected to be on the west coast of Florida and then move up along the east coast and eventually move out to sea as a result of a trough moving through the United States. And in terms of strength, you see the European model is a little bit more lenient on bringing a stronger storm. However, the GFS is bringing a weaker storm, and since the GFS model has been more reliable with this storm than the European in the past several days, I put my trust more on the GFS model that this will be a weaker storm. However, we can't rule out what the European is saying, because it is still an extremely reliable forecast. But with this sort of storm, it seems like GFS has a little bit of the edge when forecasting this, especially since it's been right for the past several days, more correct than the European model. So I'd say this should be a general track, and of course you see that Florida and a lot of the Carolinas and Georgia and even extending to mid-Atlantic could get some impacts from this storm. So pretty much all along the East Coast, especially Southeast Coast, needs to pay close attention to this, and of course Florida needs to pay attention to this, because it's likely you're going to experience tropical storm conditions at this point. Now in terms of the differences, you see that European is a little bit further east while the GFS is a little bit further west, but mostly the same, I'd say. However, in terms of the impacts you should expect, taking a look at the storm surge forecast for Florida, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge is expected in Tampa Bay. And if you don't know what storm surge is, pretty much go over land that's pretty much dry most of the time. Pretty much go along the Tampa Bay or the ocean, depending your case. Go on normally dry ground and add 2 to 4 feet on top of that, and that's how much water inundation you should expect in that area. So you guys in Tampa Bay need to pay close attention to this, because 2 to 4 feet is definitely not something to play with. especially since it only takes 2 feet of water to move the car, and this could peak up to 4 feet. And Tampa is especially vulnerable to storm surge. So you guys around Tampa need to pay close attention to this, and all across the Florida coast, like saying the Naples, Fort Myers needs to pay close attention to this, and the Keys could experience 1 to 2 feet of storm surge. So make sure to pay attention to that. And of course, the rainfall will be another concern with this storm. You see that over the next 5 days, you see that the rainfall associated with Elsa in some areas could reach up to 6 inches of rain. However, a lot of Florida is gonna get around 2 to 4 inches of rain, which is still a lot and could cause flooding, especially flash flooding. So you guys need to pay attention to the flood risk, especially even going further northward into Carolinas. Pay attention to the flood risk because it'll certainly be there with Tropical Storm Elsa. And I'm taking a look at the GFS model forecast when it comes to this storm and the precipitation and the forecasted radar to see what type of impacts the southeast and northeast should expect. You see that the rain will eventually move into Florida, and it's a very small circulation, so the rain won't extend much outwards. But if you're very close to the eye, that's where of course you'll see the heaviest rain, and you see that rain extends into the Carolinas, and we do see a decent amount of rain along the coast of Carolina, so watch out for that. And then this will eventually move out to sea. However, the European model is taking a little bit of a stronger track, so there could be that risk of some minor coastal flooding along the southeast coast and maybe even in the mid-Atlantic. And a rip current risk should certainly be there, especially if the European wants to make this as strong as it is right now. So we need to pay close attention to this over the next several days, and especially all across the East Coast, especially along shore. At least be aware of this storm because there certainly could be a risk when it comes to flooding and storm surge. Now, in terms of my forecast track, projected path and strength of this storm, I do expect this to mainly stay around the same strength, maybe strengthen just a little bit before it makes landfall somewhere in Florida at around 65 miles per hour. So very strong tropical storm. And then I do expect it to weaken and maybe strengthen just a little bit more once it gets off the coast and it absorbs a lot of that warmer Gulf Stream water, and it gets a little bit of help from this trough moving through. There's some barrel clink influences, so the wind field might expand. This won't be fully tropical by this point on Thursday. And along the coast, while the current consensus is taking this out to sea for the mid-Atlantic, you also need to pay attention closer to the coast, to the northeast coast, because you still could experience impacts with this. So make sure to pay attention to this all across the East Coast, as this could threaten a lot of you. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. Make sure to like it if you like this video. Make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather content. I hope you guys have a good day.